Welcome to Aging Insight with your host, John Ross and Lisa Schollmeyer. This program is made possible by
Welcome to another edition of Aging Insight. I'm John Ross here with Lisa Schollmeyer, and we are elder law attorneys that practice right here in your neck of the woods. But we bring you this show every week as a way to try to get the information that we have that we know is important to you as you age, as you plan for your retirement or plan for your long-term care, as you try to care about your friends and family and neighborhood and community. We know that there's a lot of different issues out there related to your health, your housing, your financial and legal needs, and that if we can get that information to you, you'll be better off, your community will be better off, your family will be better off, everybody wins. And so we want you to get that information out there, and so that's why we do this program.
Yeah, so, John, I think as people get older, the old joke is people never, as they approach, the end of their life, they never say to themselves, I wish I had worked more,
Well, that's right.
They always, that what they always do is focus generally on friends and family and those bonds and connections, and those are very important to a lot of our seniors, and they seem to become more so as people get a bit older. And so oftentimes I'll visit with seniors and they're very interested in preserving their legacy, those assets that they've worked very hard for, and they're very interested in preserving that for their family, and they really like the peace of mind that they get from thinking about planning for that to happen, for those assets and maybe that family home place to end up with the next generation.
Absolutely.
In the family. And there's just such intangible comfort that comes from that.
Sure. And along with that comes oftentimes a desire to take care of somebody, maybe help somebody out, maybe keeping assets in the family, or maybe you've got a kid that wants to buy a house but can't afford a house, or maybe they don't have the credit to afford a house, or maybe you've got an asset, a car or something else, and one of the kids wants to buy it. Yeah. And you want to keep these things in the family. You want to help these folks out, and so oftentimes you see folks getting into business transactions essentially. Right. With family.
Right, and those business transactions are there really for the benefit of everyone. Maybe the senior has assets they're not using, or they want to make sure are handed to down to a different family member. Also, maybe the payments for those assets. Maybe that senior's not in a position to make an outright gift, but yet there's going to be payments on that asset, and that can help that senior meet their monthly financial needs. And so there's often a lot of good reasons to enter into business transactions, between generations. But there's a lot of things to think about when you do that, particularly for the senior. And John, this is called Aging Insight, so let's talk about those factors from the senior standpoint.
Yeah, because the first thing, when you're talking about your assets, the things that you have, the things that you're going to need, if you're talking about assets that you may or you might need for your own care and comfort, this is not the time of your life to expose those assets to potential problems. You may want with all your heart to care for a child who's in financial trouble, and you've got a little bit of money at the bank which you're not using right now, and so you think, hey, I could give them that and they can pay me back. But if we're talking about assets that could be the difference between you getting the care that you need or not, you being able to stay at home versus having to get institutional care in a nursing home or something like that, then I don't care how good this person is, how needy they are, how dependable they are, it's not the time to expose your needed assets to other people's problems. Because, you know, Lisa, if you think about it, you say, well, I've got this one kid and he's the best kid in the whole world. No question about it, best kid in the whole world. This kid has always paid his debts, doesn't matter to whom or how, best kid in the whole world. So I feel perfectly confident giving him this, say, $50,000 as a loan because I know for a fact he will pay it back. And maybe he will, unless he gets hit in a car wreck and dies.
Right, and then are his heirs going to pay that back? And if these were funds that you really couldn't quite afford to part with, but you did, you know, because maybe that great kid got laid off from work or, you know, something, you know, it just looks like a gift.
That's right.
And
yeah, I mean, you know, and you know, my mother would always say, you know, because there would inevitably in any family, my family, your family, Lisa's family, in any family, you've got these situations where maybe some family member has loaned another family member some money and it didn't get paid back.
Yeah.
You know, and there's some strife in the family. Maybe it's direct or maybe it's some cousin, but you've heard these stories. And I can remember my mother talking about these stories and saying there is no such thing as a loan among family members. Right. You make a gift, and sometimes those people give it back.
Right.
But there's no such, you know, but there really is. And if you think about it from that standpoint, then you would never give someone or give away to someone something that you couldn't afford to lose. So even though you plan on maybe somebody paying you back, either in the form of a loan or by making payments on a piece of property, the first thing is if this is something that you can't live without, don't do it in the first place.
Right. So, boy, that starts the conversation off with a bang of, you know, think twice before you give away property or transfer property in exchange for payments. But John, you know, a lot of times seniors either can afford and they want to make that transfer, or maybe they want to see the family farm or the family home place go to a particular child that seems to care a great deal for it.
Sure.
And there is a bit of a minefield when we talk about seniors giving assets away, and you know, because there's tax issues, there's tax implications, there are future long-term care implications, there's liability implications, and so, you know, we really need to go about this in a thoughtful, formal process. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the processes you might want to put in place if you're going to be doing business with family.
I'm so glad we found the Wadley Senior Clinic. Their team specializes in caring for older adults, and their doctors listen and work with me to keep me healthy and independent. With monthly educational programs, x-ray and lab, and state-of-the-art exam rooms, I get expert care and understanding about what I'm going through. Best yet, they're easy to get to right off the interstate at Jefferson. See what Wadley Senior Clinic could do for you. Wadley Senior Clinic, where healthy relationships begin.
Hi there, I'm Larry Sims. It's been my privilege for the past several years to be a volunteer board member of Hospice of Texarkana, and there I'm able to represent community members like you. We continually customize our end-of-life care to better meet the needs of our community. As an example, our medical director and nurse practitioner still make visits to homes and facilities. Call today to learn more about the help we can give your family. Hospice of Texarkana, the nonprofit hospice established in 1985 for the community, by the community.
Welcome back to Aging Insight. I'm Lisa Scholmeyer, and I'm here with John Ross. And today we are talking about doing business with family. Often a senior is in a position because of their accumulated wealth and assets over their lifetime to maybe help out younger family members, or maybe they're thinking about their legacy and they're wanting to, during their lifetime, make sure some of those pieces of their legacy are already put in place to family members that they desire to have them. And, you know, John, probably one of the biggest things I see is the home place. You know, particularly with a lot of our farm families or a bit more of our rural communities, maybe 40 acres, you know, maybe 250 acres.
Right.
But often we will see as seniors say, you know, I've got 3 kids, 2 of them moved away to the big city, 1 of them has stayed close by and has been, you know, really instrumental in helping me stay home, and I know they love this place. And I want to make sure that they get it, and I don't want my other kids to be upset about it, and I don't want them to miss out on any
Sure.
part of the estate. So they ask, what can I do?
Right. Often in the context of, you know, maybe I want to sell them part of it, or you know, like you mentioned the larger farm. You know, I've got 40 acres. I live on the front 20. My son's been working on it, so I want to sell him the back 20.
Sure.
And that way he already owns it, and we're good there. The first thing, anytime you're going to enter into a business transaction, just because it's with family, don't treat it any different than you would if you were treating it with a perfect stranger. Don't let the family dynamic influence what is a business transaction. And if it's a business transaction, you treat it like you would any other business transaction. And that means you start out by getting good advice, but you're going to be talking about documenting this
Right.
transfer.
Well, that's right. And John, particularly when it comes to real property or real estate, it is absolutely imperative that we document, you know, on paper, the intent to sell that property or the deal between the family members, because under the law, if there's nothing in writing, then the deal never existed.
That's right. And, you know, think about it from, say, a long-term care standpoint. I had a client recently, and they had their house, but then they also owned another house, and they had a daughter that decided she was going to live in that house, and they thought, well, we'll just sell the daughter the house. And so for the last 10 or 15 years, the daughter has been writing them a check every month.
Every month, about the same amount.
For the same amount every month.
They all know what the deal is.
Everybody knows what the deal is. And yet, for all legal purposes, the parents still owned 2 houses. They had their house and they had another house, and it was in their name. And when one of those parents ends up needing some form of long-term care, the value of that house
That second house
is still
yes.
part of their resources for purposes of qualifying, say, for Medicaid or qualifying for veterans benefits, essentially getting the care they need. This house is impeding that. And the reason is because it's still in their name, and there's no documentation in anywhere about all of this.
Well, and John, taking that situation even further, let's say that there's never a need for long-term care, but the parents pass away, and while daughter lives there in that second house, maybe she's got a sister who lives in the big city. Well, if there's no documentation as to the deal the parents had made with daughter for her to purchase the home that she was living in, well, sister could come in and say, hey, half your house is mine.
That's right. And you know, particularly when you're talking about something like real estate, there's an old law out there. It's called the Statute of Frauds. It doesn't really have anything to do about people out there doing fraudulent things, but this Statute of Frauds says that certain transactions must be in writing, or else they're not valid at all. And any real estate transaction must be in writing, or it is not a valid transaction. And so even if the daughter, like in our little scenario that we just gave, even if the daughter could show that she had been making these regular monthly payments for 10 years, the fact that it was not in a written contract means that there was no valid contract, which means she ends up losing half the house to her sister,
Right.
whether she likes it or not.
Right, and you know, a lot of times when we talk to seniors and they bring up that they would like to engage in some business or, you know, move some property around with their kids and things like that. You know, when we start talking about the necessity or the good advice to paper these transactions, sometimes seniors are taken aback and they say, well, this is family and we all know what's going on and everybody's on the same page. And I would feel awkward and my child would think I did not trust them if I were to say that a lawyer's going to prepare some paperwork. And, all I can say is that you're protecting your child by getting the paperwork done properly. It shouldn't be offensive. It should be that you're protecting your child and you're also protecting yourself.
Well, and at least based on my experience, and I know as attorneys we can be jaded a little bit.
a little. We see all the bad.
We do have a tendency to see all the bad. But I can't tell you how many times I have proposed something that was perfectly fair, that somebody reacted like Lisa talked about, well, you're just doing this because you don't trust me, or something like that. Inevitably, the person caves and says, well, fine, then we just won't do it.
We'll do it the informal way.
We'll do it the informal way. And every single one of those times, that person that said, you just don't trust me,
there was a good
didn't deserve their trust.
Right, there was a good reason not to.
That's exactly right. So, there really is something to be said for, if everything is above board, nobody has a problem putting it in writing.
Right. So that's kind of our first challenge, is to make sure that we treat it like a business, that we document and paper these business transactions with family just like we would. But then we also need to consider the implications of tax implications and long-term care type implications and qualification for care benefits when we have these transactions going on. So we'll take a break and we'll come back and talk about that.
The Wadley Senior Clinic has been such a blessing for our family. Because they specialize in geriatric care, they take the time to really focus on Dad's needs. Their exam rooms are specially designed for seniors, and they offer lab and x-ray on site. With monthly educational programs on health and wellness of the mind and body, our healthcare questions get answered. Best of all, they accept Dad's Medicare benefits. See what the Wadley Senior Clinic can do for you. Wadley Senior Clinic, where healthy relationships begin.
Hi there, I'm Larry Sims. It's been my privilege for the past several years to be a volunteer board member of Hospice of Texarkana, and there I'm able to represent community members like you. We continually customize our end-of-life care to better meet the needs of our community. As an example, our medical director and nurse practitioner still make visits to homes and facilities. Call today to learn more about the help we can give your family. Hospice of Texarkana, the nonprofit hospice established in 1985 for the community, by the community.
Welcome back to the last segment of Aging Insight. Today, our episode, we're talking about dealing with family from a business transaction standpoint. Maybe you're making a loan to a family member, maybe you're selling some property to a family member, maybe that's real estate, maybe you're selling them a car, who knows? Maybe you're just allowing them to, say, pledge your assets as collateral on their own loan. But all of these are business transactions that you can get into with family. And, we first talked about you get it in writing, no question about it, get it in writing. You want whatever your agreement is to be very clear and so everybody understands the rights. But as you're doing this, as you're getting the plan together and putting this stuff in writing, don't necessarily consider just what the current circumstances are. But in all planning, whether you're talking about this, whether you're talking about your personal estate planning, always plan for what might happen, what could go wrong under the circumstances. If you're in your 70s and you're talking about making a business deal with a family member that's going to take place over the course of, say, 10 years, you're going to sell them a piece of property and they're going to make payments on it for 10 years. Well, if you're 75, that means from 75 to 85. At 85, your chances of needing long-term care are about 85%. That's pretty high, which means how is that business transaction and your need for long-term care going to interact?
Right, and we've seen this quite a bit where we do have business contracts that are to take place over a long period of time where a senior is the recipient of a stream of payments. And it's great for the senior from the standpoint of that stream, that monthly payment augments their monthly income and they can pay for their needs. But if it comes to a point where that senior needs long-term care, then all of a sudden that stream of payments can be a bit more problematic.
Right. Let me give you an example. Earlier we talked about the situation where, mom and dad have their 40 acres and they're going to sell the back 20 to their son, and let's say they're going to sell it to him over the course of, say, 10 years. And, understand that under the Medicaid rules, if mom or dad needed to go to a nursing home, the house and all the land that the house sits on, in other words, the house and the whole 40 acres, is a non-countable asset. Okay? But if they've sold the back 20 to the son and now they hold a note, an account receivable. In other words, instead of owning 20 acres of dirt, they own the right to payments over a period of time. Those payments are a countable asset. And we're not talking about monthly income here that has to be dealt with. Medicaid says that all of the future payments added together is an asset just like it was cash in the bank.
Right, even though you haven't received it yet.
Even though you haven't received it yet.
Yeah.
And so you've got a situation where you have an asset that keeps you from qualifying for the benefits and yet cannot be used to pay for the care because
you don't have the money
because
yet.
you don't have the money yet. And those sort of situations can be very dangerous and very hard to fix on the back end.
Right, but on the front end, if we have a situation where we're going to sell a parcel of land to a child and it is connected with your homestead, you're on the front 20 acres and you're selling the back 20 acres to your son, well, that deal can be structured in such a way that the son has an exclusive ownership right to the back 20 acres, that the son is going to make payments that represent, a percent of the fair market value of that property, and that the son is going to acquire complete and total title to that property upon making his last payment. And if we structure it the right way, well, then we can still maintain some exemptions for your homestead and the whole 40 acres, but yet we can still guarantee that that son who has put the effort in that you want to reward for all the work they've done around the place with that back 20 acres, you can make sure that happens.
Yeah, so like in that scenario where you've got an asset that doesn't count against you, you can structure it so that it still doesn't count against you and you don't mess up by turning a non-countable asset into a countable asset. You can do this the opposite way too. Let's say you got mom who's single and owns 2 cars. Well, 1 car is excluded, but 2 cars counts. Mom says, well, I'm going to sell my car to my grandson, but I'm going to keep it in my name till he makes all the payments.
Well, that doesn't work in that situation. Now you've messed it up there. So we want to get the car into grandson's name and have a paper transaction of the payments that are going to be paid to grandma for that car. And if there's a need for long-term care, then hopefully one of the options would be to refinance the remaining payments due with a credit union or a bank so that we can go ahead and get that taken care of.
Yeah. And then the last kind of issue here is in your estate planning. I had a member of my own family who had left a will, and among the beneficiaries, in the will it says, well, I've got these, let's say 3 beneficiaries, but I've loaned this one a bunch of money. And when I die, I want his share reduced by all the money that I've given him, except for the part that he's paid back.
Right.
Now that's what it said. Now this was not something I drafted, please. But that's what it said. There was no specifics. There was no dollar amounts. There was nothing. Upon his death, there's no way of identifying what this is. And I get this all the time with clients. They say, well, I've loaned so-and-so $10,000 and they're making payments, so just put in there that their share is reduced by however much they still owe.
And most of those heirs who had borrowed from the senior at the time of death, what is their response? Oh, I paid it all back.
I paid it all back. And there's very little proof of this. There's nothing to document it. Even if you have papered it, let's say you have a loan contract that says they will make payments, it can be very difficult halfway through that loan contract when the person dies to determine whether or not they've made all their payments. Did they make them on time? Were they late on any?
And what you're doing really is setting up, really a battle with your heirs where they're not real happy with each other. Siblings aren't real happy because everybody knows that you loaned one of them a lot of money, and so there are some ways you can structure those transactions and deal with them, such as having a separate bank account where loan payments are made specifically to that bank account, so we can go back and pull those bank records and know exactly, and that's the only thing you use that bank account for, is to receive deposits from the obligee.
Yeah, that's
But
right.
a lot of things you can do, but if you're going to enter into business with family, give it some thought and don't just jump into it without advice and an informal basis, because it will come back and haunt you.
That's right. So like anything else, get good advice and get good information. And you can get that good information by watching our show. You can call our radio program every Saturday at noon when Lisa and I are live on the air. That's 98.7 noon on Saturdays. Or you can pick up a copy of the Aging Insight magazine. It's got a bunch of good articles in there. Otherwise, stick around till next week and we'll have a brand new program. See you then.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Aging Insight program with John Ross and Lisa Scholmeyer. This program is made possible by